Good morning, afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Neurodiversity from the Inside Out, the Future of Our Children. My name is Uzma Akser, and I'm thrilled to be your host for this important conversation. Today, we'll be looking at supporting neurodivergent students through the transition to higher education. And we welcome Dr. Eric Endlich, a clinical psychologist and founder of Top College Consultants. Eric guides neurodivergent students nationwide through the college application process. He co-teaches the UC Irvine Continuing Education course for educational consultants, working with students with learning differences, and co-manages a 25,000 member Facebook group for parents of college-bound neurodivergent students. Dr. Endlich has served on the board and the Learning Differences Neurodiversity Committee of the Independent Educational Consultants Association, IECA, and was honored with Making a Difference Award for contributions such as Database of Neurodiversity-Friendly Colleges. A national presenter, researcher, and a professional writer, he is also on the board for the College Autism Network and helped found the Neurodiverse Couples Institute for the Association for Autism and Neurodiversity. Dr. Endlich is regularly interviewed by various media, including Forbes, Money Magazine, and the US News and World Report. Thank you, Eric. I mean, what a remarkable journey of achievements. We
Well,
welcome
thanks
you
for inviting
today.
me, Uzma. Good to see you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Likewise. Really, I just want to dive right into our conversation
Sure.
today. And I'm excited, really excited to talk about this topic. And I want to ask you, and really my first question today is what inspired you to establish Top College Consultants and focus on neurodivergent students?
Sure. Well, I'm a parent of neurodivergent children for starters, so I
Yeah.
really kind of understand the journey that other parents go through. And as a clinical psychologist and former therapist, I was already working with teens with neurodivergent individuals. And I realized that some of them went off to college without being fully ready and weren't successful. And so it's so important to kind of prepare students to be successful, not just to get into college. So I really kind of leaned into that. I also figured out at some point that I'm neurodivergent myself. So it's, personal as a parent, adult, and consultant and psychologist. I kind of wear many hats.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, how has your background as a clinical psychologist really shaped your approach, to college consulting?
Yeah, that's a good question. The folks who do what I do, college admissions consulting, come from many different backgrounds: college admissions, high schools, teachers, computer scientists, lawyers, doctors. We have very different, a variety of backgrounds. But I found being a mental health professional, being a therapist, really helps me in that process of building the relationships with students. So I like starting to work with students early on, eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, so that by the time that we get to kind of building the college list and working on the college applications in 11th and 12th grades, we have a relationship and I understand their needs. They feel comfortable working with me. I also found, in addition to being a writer and editor, that being a psychologist really helps me help students self-reflect when it comes time to writing their essays. These essays that they write for college admissions are very different from the ones they're used to writing in school. And there's a lot of in sort of reflection and introspection that they need to do. And helping them kind of dig deeper is something, I've been doing for years.
I love that. And I think, that's so important because we often put this pressure on, we're not even talking about neurodivergent students here, we're talking about everyone. We often put this pressure on them to write these essays and get prepared for college when they haven't had even this practice during the over the years. And you've mentioned that you start, grade 8, grade 9. And I feel like that's kind of a more organic way of doing it because they're getting to understand what their needs are, and looking, like you said, at themselves and the situation, and then really getting ready for that college life ahead of them. So I really love that, and I see this kind of organic growth that's taking place when you're sharing what you're doing, because we often forget when a child is at college, at school, they do get that support, and as they grow, that support is reduced, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And then we get them ready. Yeah.
right. There's a lot of help available in colleges and universities. There's a lot of resources there. It's not that there's no help. It's just that the process for getting the help shifts. Whereas,
Yeah.
at least in the US, it's often delivered sort of automatically to students. High schools, public schools may identify a disability, may sort of push services out to the child. Whereas in college, it's kind of flipped, where the student has to go out and seek out those accommodations and services.
Yeah, so the student has to be well aware and prepared and ready to ask for that help. And what would you do to prepare them? How can they even ask for that help that they need?
Yeah, so I, encourage families to kind of step back and look at who's doing what, from the beginning of the day when students wake up to the end of the day when they go to bed. In what ways are parents, guardians, or professionals involved in helping students get ready for school, helping them get their work done, helping them manage their time, self-care, socializing, all the things that students do? What are they doing for themselves, and what are other people kind of stepping in to manage? And then look for ways to gradually shift that over. So, for example, if a parent is making the student's appointments with the counselor or doctor or dentist, what have you, kind of teaching the student, where's the phone number, where's the website, what's the process, so that when students need to make their own appointments or refill their medication or whatever it might be in college, they're used to doing it. It isn't kind of like being thrown into the deep end.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And what would you suggest, to parents? What advice would you give them? When can they start doing this at home?
At any point. I mean, frequently the students that we work with are on special education plans, what they call 504 plans or IEPs. Students should be attending those meetings. They can at some point start chairing or running the meetings. So the more that, as early as students are able to, learn to do their own laundry, get an alarm clock and wake themselves up in the morning, all those different pieces of that they'll have to be managing in college, they should do as soon as they're able to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
Certainly don't wait
super
until high
important.
school ends.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely, because
Yeah.
they need it's practice, right? It takes time. It takes time, it's practice, for them to become independent, and pick up on these skills. Advocacy is a big thing, right? So, ha- you know, again, I'm a parent, and I've done a lot of advocating for my child who's neurodivergent, and now we're in the process to guide him and to teach him how to advocate for himself. And I think that's super important when it comes to college life. Um, how can students, how can they even start advocating for their own needs during the application process and within college life?
Yeah. Like I said, they can be, attending those special education meetings and having a
Yeah.
voice. It's important for adults to encourage that. There's a saying in the field, in the autism world, nothing about us without us. Um,
Mm,
Ask the students what they need, get feedback on what's working for them. Because they absolutely, when they make that transition, are going to have to kind of get into the driver's seat. Maybe they've been in the back seat. Maybe the parent's been driving the bus. Again, as a special needs parent, I know what it's like to be that on the front lines advocating for your child. But at some point, students need to self-advocate. So part of that is learning their needs. Figuring out what are the things that you're good at, and where are the areas that you need help. When you go off to college, are you going to need help managing your time, making friends, taking care of yourself, and what are those resources and how do you access them? And during that college search process, there's opportunities to start to step up and communicate with professionals. I mean, for the students, not just the parents, to do that. And I think that's one of the benefits of working with consultants like us, that students start getting comfortable talking directly to a professional. Most of the meetings I have are just me and the student. Sometimes parents will jump in. Sometimes I'll have a separate meeting with parents. But getting comfortable having those meetings with professionals really helps prepare students for all those meetings that they're going to have in college with professors, with disability service staff, possibly tutors, residence hall assistants, and various other adults in college.
Yeah, that's
So
huge.
there's yeah, and when they're searching for colleges, when they're going on tours, they should be encouraged to ask questions when they're sitting in those information sessions. Raise your hand and ask questions. It's often the parents who are on the tours who are asking the questions. I've been on many college tours, and students often just sort of walk along very quietly, or sit in the audience quietly. Those are great opportunities for them to speak up. And if they start
Yeah,
building those connections with college admissions professionals, in some case that helps them, be visible to those professionals when they're making those admissions decisions. Like, oh, I remember that student. They were very, interested and interactive.
yeah, absolutely. And I think the way you're describing it, there's so many opportunities for them to come and join and ask, for support and really practice the advocacy skills that they need to before coming into college. So it's not scary, it's not daunting for them when they come into college that they now have to figure out themselves. So there's lots of opportunities. I guess it's just you know taking the opportunity and utilizing that and having parents. I
Yeah,
feel at this point, really parents encouraging their children
right.
to speak up, and the parents taking that back seat.
Yeah, and I'm sure, as you know, as a parent, there are many situations when you and your child and a professional are together, and the professional asks a question, and as the parent, you sort of jump in right away.
Yeah.
But take a breath and look over at your child and say, "You can answer this. You got
Yeah,
this. What do you
absolutely. And
think?"
that's, yeah, and I think that's equally important. Not just, I think, actually, I think it's a parent who has to prepare themselves first mentally, before even encouraging their child, because we're so used to, and I'm saying this as a special needs parent myself, right? I'm saying this because we often just jump in, um, because we're so emotionally attached to our child, and we know with our child who may be on the autism spectrum, there's certain challenges and they need the extra support, that we just want to be their voice, all the time. But as they're growing into the adult life and entering college and then hopefully the workplace, they're going to learn to speak up for themselves. They need these skills. So I guess, as parents, I'm going to speak out to all the parents who are listening today, that please, it's a big step, but we can take it. And if we can just give the child the autonomy, to advocate, and we're there behind them, right? And then get them to practice before they start their college life.
Yeah, again, it's so
Mm.
tempting to kind of stay in the driver's seat and think, well, but I know better, and I'm comfortable speaking up. But when you picture your child, if they're going to be moving away and living at college, having meetings with their professors, having to explain to disability services what their needs are, how is that going to be? Can you picture
Yeah,
that? And if that's not something that if they're not there, then this is the opportunity to just start shifting that to, as the parents start again turning to your child saying, go ahead, you know that, you can answer that.
yeah,
Well, and there's if they're not ready, it's okay. So if you're hearing this and thinking like, oh, my child couldn't do that, they need more time, they need to work on these skills, that's fine. For example, students will take gap years.
mm,
They'll apply to college, they'll get in, they'll defer for a year, so they'll have an additional year to work on things like time management, self-advocacy, and they could do that with the help of a gap year program that teaches those skills. So they could go to summer programs for those skills. So don't panic that these skills aren't in place yet. They can also get
yeah,
support in college and continue to build some of these skills too. So if they go
yeah.
to a college that has an autism support program or a learning support program, they may be working with professionals who are teaching them self-advocacy, time management, etc.
Yeah, that's good. That's reassuring. I'm sure many parents listening today will be reassured at what you're sharing, because it's huge. It's a big thing letting go of your children. and they're entering this real, adult life and getting into college, and some living independently. So it's a massive, massive transition. I guess really my next question to you would be the misconceptions that exist, about neurodivergent students in higher education. Do you often find that?
Oh, they're endless.
Yeah,
You know, still assuming, oh, if you have this certain label, then this is what we can expect of you.
yeah,
Everyone's different, neurodivergent or otherwise. So try to go in without assumptions. Students, I love working with students who are twice exceptional, who are gifted, but also neurodivergent, have some type of learning difference or mental health challenge. And frequently there's sort of assumptions in either direction, either because they have a learning difference, their capabilities are underestimated and they may be
mm,
highly capable. But because they have that label, oh, you shouldn't take this higher level class, you shouldn't shoot for this type of university, when they may be perfectly capable of. Or the flip side, because they're so bright and maybe they're getting really good grades in high school, that their challenges are overlooked. The professionals around them may not realize that they still need support emotionally, socially, or otherwise. They may be really struggling behind the scenes, and having good grades isn't the whole story. So that's one
yeah,
one type of assumption or misconception that often happens. And then there's just things like, oh, if you have an autism diagnosis, then you probably you know aren't social or don't make friends. Some of my autistic students don't have many friends. Some of them are outgoing and love socializing. So you
yeah,
can't just sort of make a blanket assumption across the board.
absolutely,
Also,
absolutely.
some students want and need support in college. Others either don't need it because they're already doing great, they just happen to be neurodivergent, or maybe they don't want it. And so saying, like, oh, here's the program for you, the student has to have buy in. If the student
Mm.
isn't okay with getting help and support, it doesn't matter if the support is there.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. They have to be ready to take that support if they want to and if they need it. Absolutely agree. It's we've talked about parents, and we've discussed how parents can help that child, transition into college. What about high schools? How can they be better prepared to support their neurodivergent students for this transition?
Well, some high schools are doing a great job. We work with students who are in private high schools. Some of them are specialized in working with students with learning differences. Some of them are not, but they're small and supportive and still a great environment for students. Public high schools, some of them have support programs already. So some of them are doing a great job, but it's the high school staff should really understand what that switch is going to be like in college. Again, some of them
Mm.
are very aware of that. But for example, I encourage students and families to meet with disability services early on when they're looking at colleges to understand what the services are, what kind of accommodations they can get. Sometimes once they make that shift to college, parents are not welcome in those meetings. They may be in some colleges, or the college may say, no, we only meet with students. Parents are not invited to those meetings. So, high school staff should understand that so that they're training kids to understand what are your diagnoses, what are your accommodations, why do you have those accommodations, what are you going to need in college. Have those conversations. One of the first things I ask students when I meet them isn't just what accommodations and services do you get in high school, but which ones do you find helpful.
Yeah.
Sometimes students will say, I have this study hall or this resource center that's super helpful, or they may say, yeah, I go to it, but I don't really need it. I don't really get much out of it. So I want to really understand, what are they using and what are they going to continue to need when they go to college.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think asking the actual student themselves is it's important, and it's probably one of the biggest steps to take anyway. So that's wonderful, wonderful to hear that you're doing that. And I guess asking you now about a story, that of a student, 'cause I'm sure you've worked with many students, but one particular student, um, you know, a story that's been touching, meaningful to you.
Oh gosh, there's so many.
I'm
I had a
sure.
student. I just got an email from a student a week or two ago saying, thank you so much for all your help. And they committed to a college that they didn't know about when they met me. So if we hadn't been working together, that college wouldn't have even been on their radar screen. And it's a college that they felt is going to be a great fit for them and give them the help they need. That's one example. I had a student with a disability a couple of years ago that came from a very challenging background, single parent. Parent was on disability. Parent didn't speak English, so that the student really had to kind of self-advocate from a young age, and he had challenges. He was first generation, so wasn't getting any help at home in the college application process. And he wrote a really powerful essay about his disability. He got amazing scholarship support, above and beyond paying all of the expenses for college, and got into just, top colleges around the country. So that was
Oh,
really exciting, very fulfilling to work with. I had another student this year who really struggled. She was really lacking in self-confidence. Parents weren't in the picture very much. I didn't even meet one of her parents, and the other parent wasn't terribly involved. So when it came time to writing the essays, she was very tentative. I don't know what to write. I don't have any good ideas. I don't think this sounds very good. So I would just be in the meetings, kind of coaching her through it. This is fine. You're doing great. Keep going. A lot of brainstorming, a lot of encouragement. She got through it. She got into every college she applied to. So, you know,
that's
it's just
beautiful.
that patience and perseverance really pays off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having such a wonderful support system in place as well, and having your professional expertise to support these individuals, because you mentioned that the first, example and the first story you shared about, the child obviously not having that family support, and that's wonderful to see that he could get support from the likes of you and your company, which is obviously it's challenging, to travel this journey alone. So you do need that support network, and it's wonderful. And I'm sure you have
Yeah,
plenty of more
it's
beautiful stories to share.
it's so anxiety provoking. That's
Yeah,
one of the reasons why I do what I do. And I forgot to mention when you ask being a psychologist, I'm
yeah,
used to helping people with anxiety and stress. And this process is so stressful. There are countries in the world where college admissions is very straightforward. You take a
mm,
test, you get a score, this is the university you're going to. In the
yeah,
US, at least, and to some extent in the UK and some other countries, it's much more complex. There's writing involved, there's recommendations. Parents are trying to figure out, should students submit test scores if it's test optional? What activities should they be involved in? What courses should they take? It's so confusing and anxiety
yeah.
provoking that being able to kind of keep folks on track and give them information from the get go can be very calming for them.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's the whole process, and like you said, it's stressful, and I think you already navigate. You're trying to navigate life at that stage and age in life anyway, and then you have all this added pressure to complete this, huge writing exercise. It is pretty
Yeah.
daunting,
One
and
other
everything else that
thing,
goes with it.
yeah, one of the things that families often say when they come to our company is the reason we're picking you, the reason we came to you is because we don't know which colleges offer the kind of support our child needs.
Mm,
There's thousands of colleges. How do we know where to start this search? And
yeah,
we, not only guide them, but I created a database of what I call neurodiversity-friendly colleges. It's freely available on our website, topcollegeconsultants.com. You can go to the database, you can sort it. They're mostly in the US, but there are some in other countries, and see where are the support programs, how much do they cost, what do they offer, who's eligible for them. So that, whether you want to hire us or not, there's free resources that we provide to help
yeah.
families navigate this complicated
That's
journey.
wonderful. Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful, and I'm sure parents would appreciate seeing that because it's, yeah, trying to even navigate what college to look at. or which one would be, neurodivergent friendly it's a big task in itself. So thank you.
Mhm.
I'm sure that would be very, very helpful for many families. And I guess just to understand what, powerful strategies, may I guess share with students, how can they start this process early on? You did mention earlier that you start with grade 8, grade 9, but what else can you do to support them early on? Um,
Sure. So, I mean, there's many pieces to this. One piece is if you know what you want to do, then kind of map out a path towards that. So,
yeah,
of course, lots of students who are in eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, even when they get to college, have no idea what they want to do, which is
yeah,
complete. In the US, that's really fine. I understand in the UK, it's a bit more specialized. You study, physics or math or English or philosophy. In the US, you can go to college and be undeclared and figure out a year or two into college what you want to study. But for those who do know, I want to be a veterinarian, I want to be a computer scientist, a game designer, an artist, an actor, a musician. If you know that, then start looking at that pathway early on. What
yeah,
courses are you going to take in high school that will fit that path? So that colleges look at you and say, oh, I can see that you want to be an engineer because you took physics and calculus and engineering and you went to a summer engineering camp. And think about the activities. You don't have to pay for extra programs or camps. I was just using that as an example. Maybe
yeah,
you are designing stuff, over the summer, you're had students who built bicycles or cars or computers who were, future engineers. Or if you want to be you want to study creative writing, are you writing stories or poems while you're in high school? So kind of mapping out that pathway, both to prepare you for that career and make sure that you like it, but also to demonstrate that that's something you're really passionate about. So that's one area. We talked about the self-advocacy. We talked also about kind of identifying your needs. If a student
mm,
says, I'm not really good at making friends, okay, well then look for colleges that have, neurodiversity clubs or mental health clubs or autism support programs with social events. So kind of try to match your needs with the colleges out there that can support you.
yeah. That's massive. I think it's important. Not every college is right for the student, and not every student is right for the college. And I think that's really important to see it that way. They might be looking for a certain support that that particular college may not have. So with your expertise again and your knowledge, you can share that and support the student and make it easier for them. I love that. I think it's so important. Like you mentioned, sometimes a lot of students don't know. Okay, they're not sure what they want to do. At college or you know, some know from a very young age. But I guess it's the opportunity to navigate. It's the opportunity to figure out. And if they need to take a break, they need to take a break, and that's okay. A gap year, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Mhm.
But either way, it's fine so long as they have that support. Because I think just being in this journey alone is challenging. But then on top of that, if you have your neurodivergent, um, you have different layers of challenges on top of that you're working with anyway. So I honestly feel that having that support system is so important for the family and for that child who's going to now be entering college. What changes would you like to see? I'm curious to understand what changes would you like to see or hope to see in college systems that can really support neurodivergent individuals. I guess more so.
Yeah. So, great question. I've talked about support programs that are out there, but to me, in the ideal world, the
Yeah.
vision that I want to see us move towards, institutions and organizations, whether they're colleges or workplaces, will be inclusive and welcoming of all types of people, neurodivergent or otherwise, so that the burden is less on the student to self-advocate because the accommodations are kind of baked in or built in.
Yeah. I
So
love
that
that.
would be, in other words, like an autism friendly campus or neurodiversity friendly campus. That may sound kind of, pie in the sky, but it's already being done. In Ireland, for example, there's a charity called As I Am that has created this template for autism-friendly universities. And they've had universities start to kind of go through this process of figuring out how they can be more inclusive and welcoming as an institution, not just a separate program that a student has to go to. So that it's, in the same way that a student who may have issues with mobility, if there's ramps and elevators throughout the campus, they don't have to ask someone to help them lift their wheelchair because it's already built in.
Yeah.
I'm on the board for the College Autism Network, and we are working to develop an autism-friendly template as well, so that universities can go through this process.
That's wonderful. And I think, this can become a reality. I'm always, talking about this, and even during my training or advocacy work, I always talk about how everything, workplaces, schools, colleges should be neuro-inclusive. We shouldn't have to ask, for that help. Accommodations, certain modifications, put them in place. Sometimes they could be, they can cost nothing, or they can be the most tiniest of the accommodations that, somebody needs, but be aware of it and let's create that space for everyone,
Yeah,
which is so
yeah.
important. Yeah,
And instructors
absolutely.
could be proactively speaking to their students. What
Yeah,
else can I do what are your needs? Please meet with me or speak with me if there's anything I can do to be more accommodating. When I was at a
absolutely.
conference, speaking at a conference a couple of months ago, I spoke with a professor who said she uses this idea. It's called Universal Design for Learning, or
Yeah,
UDL. She said, instead of making students come to me and tell me they need extra time, I just give all students unlimited time on their exams.
yeah, yeah,
Some professors might say that's crazy, but she's doing it. Students get as much time as they need. So nobody needs to ask for extra time, because who
yeah,
knows, you might need extra time, not because you're neurodivergent, because you got sick over the weekend or whatever it might be. You're just,
yeah,
off
absolutely.
your game.
And it makes
So,
sense.
mhm. And, if you can send that message to students early on. For example, some students might need to fidget or stim or move their bodies. Hey, if you need to stand up in class or leave the room and come back, that's fine. As long as you're not disrupting the class, you do whatever you need to do so that you can access and learn the curriculum, rather
Yeah,
than having these expectations. All students must sit in their chairs and look at me and etc.
yeah, absolutely. And I agree. And I think it's so important. And I share this in my training when I'm working with the corporates, and I say, well, look, it doesn't matter if it's a neurodivergent employee. It could be all employees need that, support. Um, Again, like you said, the extra time. It could be, somebody just doesn't like the hustle and bustle of coming into work at 9 o'clock and they want to come 9:30. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
to be neurodivergent to come in at 9:30 because it's an overwhelming situation. They could be neurotypical, but they just need this
Yeah,
accommodation in
or
place.
they were dropping their
Um,
child off at daycare,
that's it.
or they have a
Absolutely.
sleep disorder and they can't get up early in the morning.
So many
There's
different reasons.
lots of different reasons. Same thing in the
Absolutely.
workplace for sound and light. Try to create softer lighting or
Mm,
avoid a overly noisy environment. And it may not because of neurodivergence. Maybe a student has an auditory issue where it's hard for them to filter out noise, or they have
exactly.
sensitivity to light.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so much. There's so much, and we can talk about this for forever, really. And I would love to, but we are running out of time. And I just wanted to ask you, I guess that last question I have for today, anyway, is how can parents, and educators, how can they work together to support these students?
Well, I sort of feel like the answer is built into the question. It work together. The phrase is work together.
Yeah, there you go.
We should all be on the same team. The student,
Yeah,
the family, the educators, and if there's consultants in the picture, because we all have the same goal. We all
yep.
want the same thing, which is for students to be happy, successful, healthy, have a good life ahead of them.
I love that.
So it's important, once you realize that we're not on opposite sides.
No,
Uh, Sometimes, a school might see a consultant as an outsider, or the school might feel like the parents they're going to have to go to battle with the parents, or vice
mm,
versa.
mm,
Um, But again, I'm a special needs parent, and I can remember times when my kids were growing up and we did have good relationships with the staff in schools, and it was just a dream. It's just,
Yeah.
with school staff saying, what does your child need to be successful? Since we all want the same thing, once you kind of step back and realize that, then a lot of things fall into place. But if you have that mindset of it's us versus them, you're going to get off on the wrong foot to begin with.
Yeah. I agree. I absolutely agree. As a parent and as a professional, I agree because if we, I always say it's that child, right? It's not about us. It's not about you. It's not about me as professionals. It's about that child. And if we want the best for that child, then we have to work in a team. We have to be that one team who's supporting that child, and that's it. You know, and that's how we really can have a successful outcome, whatever it may look like. So I definitely agree. And it's so important, but we are running out of time, and I could talk about this topic forever because I think it's not just close to my heart, but it's super important to be aware of, preparing our students for college life and really starting early, like you've mentioned. Um, I'd love to have you on again in the future. Honestly, I would love that
Thank
if
you.
you're available. No, thank you.
It's a pleasure
So
talking to you.
really, absolutely, and thank you, Eric, for sharing your insights with us today. Both your experience and your expertise. Really, it's invaluable. To our listeners, and I just really look forward to having you. In future episodes,
Oh, thank
where
you.
we can talk more and explore more. So thank you very much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.